It's appealing to believe in monsters and the horrors of the unknown, in those things that rustle in the dark of night. It's an escape from reality, from the true horrors lurking in the woods. Rumors are created to widen your eyes and make you look over your shoulder. Honestly, I wish it were just that, another ghost story, but not quite. This story is about how my childhood died, how I lost the ability to fall asleep without checking what was behind me, or without peeking through the crack in my bedroom door. There was only a week left until summer vacation, our last one before high school. We were gathered in Brianna's treehouse after school. It was our usual spot. The walls were plastered with strange, almost satanic drawings. And if you dared to say that word satanic out loud, you'd get a quick punch in the stomach. Old Ouija boards lay around. Candles glowed softly next to smoky incense sticks. I lazily swayed in a hammock, focused on my Game Boy, trying to defeat the next gym leader in Pokemon Gold. Crackling alt-rock blared from a worn-out radio, and a gentle breeze drifted in through the open window. Brianna sat opposite me, practicing tarot card readings on Casey, who tried to look bored every time I glanced at him, but I could see him secretly peeking at the next card. "Damn, bad spread, Casey," Brianna frowned, holding a card with a pile of swords. Trying to act brave, Casey snorted, "Well, what the hell does that mean?" His voice trembled slightly. Brianna hesitated, remembering 10 of swords. It means, she paused, an inevitable, painful end. Ruin. A faint smile appeared at the corners of her mouth. "Oh, you tarot fool," Casey scoffed, trying to hide his concern. "You'd better lay out your brother again or some other ghost." At that moment, he regretted mentioning Brianna's brother. 2 years ago, his life was taken in a truck accident. He was the one who built this treehouse. Now it's the only memory of him. Brianna desperately sought closure, trying to contact his spirit. Rumors spread about her attempts to speak with the dead, but we were the only ones who saw her preparations firsthand. "Shut your trap, Cyclops, or I'll curse your only good eye," Brianna snapped. Casey had a lazy eye, which earned him the nickname Crazy Casey, and cruel rumors spread that he cut up small animals. Of course, that wasn't true. I was about to intervene when the hatch suddenly slammed with such force that we instantly fell silent. Panic and anxiety flashed in our eyes. "Let me in, you freaks!" Steve's voice came, empty and breathless.
"You have to knock, Steve, otherwise we won't let you in," I smiled. Casey joined me by the hatch, smiling. "Yeah, man, what if you're a mimic or some other nasty thing trying to trick and kill us?" He put his arm around my shoulders and playfully shook me. I laughed. "Or maybe he's being held hostage and trying to warn us." "Guys, seriously, I saw something near Old Boldy. I have to tell you." Steve's voice turned pleading. This piqued our interest. Scary stories, urban legends, and local mysteries brought us closer, uniting us with curiosity about the unknown. "Let him in, guys," Brianna said softly. Sunbeams slid through the window, coloring her skin a bronze gold hue. At that moment, I realized how beautiful she was. Casey and I quickly exchanged glances and silently agreed, opening the hatch. Steve's face, covered in scars, appeared on the last rung. "Finally," he mumbled as we helped him climb in. Casey bolted the hatch shut, making Steve flinch. He was breathing heavily, almost gasping. His face, etched with old scars he never explained, seemed wrinkled and old. Sweat dripped down his damaged skin. He looked like he was about to faint. "God, man, breathe." I blurted out several questions at once. "What did you see? Why were you running back?" Brianna sat down next to me, forming a small circle. All eyes were on Steve. "Okay, tell us everything, step by step," she encouraged. Steve nodded, took a final sip, and carefully set the can down, gathering his thoughts. I was reading in my usual spot near Old Boldy when suddenly a huge shadow covered the sun and flew overhead. I looked up, a vulture. Well, nothing special, right? But the next day, in the same spot, another vulture, flying in the same direction. At first I thought it was déjà vu, but I got curious, so I decided to follow where they were going. I couldn't see well through the trees, but I knew it was close to Old Boldy. He paused, inhaling. Even if it was another scary story, we listened spellbound. I climbed Old Boldy and looked around, and then I saw them. He paused again, taking a long drink. It seemed he was deliberately dragging it out to keep us in suspense. "And what did you see?" I asked impatiently. "Vultures, just black dots circling to the northwest." We leaned back, disappointed. Casey shook his head. "Just vultures. Something's always dying there. Big deal." "No, that's not it. That was 2 weeks ago, and they're still there. 20, maybe 30 vultures in the exact same spot." Brianna carefully raised her eyebrow. "Are you sure it's the same place? You said it was far away. You could be mistaken." Steve was ready for this. "I'm sure. The exact same place for 2 weeks straight, and I think they've been there even longer." I shrugged. Maybe it's a cow or something. With so many of them, it takes time to pick everything clean. Again, Steve shook his head. "Not with that many vultures. They would have cleaned everything up long ago. 2 weeks. Something serious is going on there." He took a deep breath and finally calmed down a bit.
"No lie?" Brianna asked again. There was interest in her voice.
"Not a bit."
"So do you understand what this means?" Steve said quietly, as the sun finally disappeared. Casey nodded slowly. Hesitation, akin to belief, began to appear in his expression.
Yes, I didn't believe it before, but now this might be our best chance. Brianna nervously began shuffling her tarot cards. It can't be. I've only heard fables. Just fables. She avoided our gazes. I, however, was completely confused. My family had moved from the north almost 4 years ago. I was still getting used to the southern hills, the heat, the accents, the strange culture, and especially the local legends. Everything was alien to me. I scratched my head, feeling like a foolish chimpanzee. "What the hell are you talking about?" I asked, my voice trailing off as all three turned and stared at me. These were my friends, almost family, but at this moment they looked terrifying. Steve, with his scars illuminated by the dim candlelight, resembled a zombie. Casey's lazy eye made his gaze diverge, and a creepy smile played on his face. Brianna nervously shuffled the cards, like a witch about to cast a curse. And all together, they uttered in one voice, strangely harmonious, "The Wishmaker." Who the hell is that?" I mumbled, feeling curious despite everything. Steve turned to Casey. "Slide the cooler over here. We'll need more soda." Casey pulled it over, handed everyone a can. We opened them almost simultaneously, and Steve sat closer, crossing his legs and placing his hands on his knees. The Wishmaker is not a ghost or a demon, not even a human. Although some believe he once was, everyone agrees on one thing. You don't find the well finds you. He took a sip and continued. "They say the well moves beneath the limestone and roots, appearing only when death is near, or when someone's soul becomes too heavy and calls to it. It could be an old stone ring in a lonely field, a dilapidated well behind a burned-down barn, or a wooden well by a stream. One of the clear signs is vultures circling for days until the air turns foul. Vultures are the key." He paused again, letting the words sink into us like poison. "They say the Wishmaker waits at the bottom, listening for footsteps. If you lean down and look, you will only see the silhouette of a man. Even if the sun shines directly overhead, only 2 bright white eyes are clearly visible. He will ask you only one question.
They say it's always different. He might ask about your darkest secret, a sin, a broken promise, or demand a beloved item. No one knows why. It is only known that if you fulfill his demand, he will grant your wish. But you must be careful. You will get exactly what you ask for, without any deviation. If you refuse, try to cheat, or break your promise, the Wishmaker's well will disappear, and then vultures will begin to pursue you. Bad luck will seep into your life. Animals will avoid you, and eventually, you yourself will disappear. The Wishmaker must feed, and no one has ever found the well a second time. He leaned back, and for a moment there was silence. I broke it. So, you're serious? There's no chance this is actually true? Steve slowly shook his head, his scarred face serious. Look, I'm just saying one thing. This story is very old, and vultures have been circling there beyond Old Baldy for an eternity. We should check. Who knows? Maybe we'll actually be lucky enough to get a wish. Casey's eyes lit up with excitement. I could get rid of my lazy eye, he exclaimed. Steve nodded approvingly, touching his scars. Brianna looked down at the cards. A shadow of doubt fell across her face. Wishes are dangerous, unreliable, she muttered. But in her eyes, I noticed a craving. I wondered what I would ask for myself if it were true. Do you really believe in this? My question seemed to tear through their thoughts, and Steve was the first to answer. At worst, we'll find what the vultures are circling, probably some dead creature. Nothing dangerous, and it will be a great start to the holidays. His words hung in the air, and I realized that we had all silently agreed.
We developed a plan under the pale moon, staying in Brianna's cabin longer than we wanted. We had to tell our parents that we were staying at Brianna's because her relatives rarely checked on her. They were uncomfortable with her rituals and attempts to summon her brother. On the last day of school, we would gather, ride our bikes to the abandoned railway tracks, from there to the forest path, and then climb Old Baldy. From there, we would determine where the vultures were circling. Steve suggested bringing something valuable, important to each of us, just in case the Wishmaker actually appeared and demanded a sacrifice. I didn't know what to bring, and I hadn't chosen a wish yet. I checked old boxes under my bed and found various trinkets, tickets, photos with my grandfather in the snow, and then I found my lucky token, worn but dear from childhood. It seemed to fit perfectly. I put it in my backpack, deciding that even if the Wishmaker turned out to be a figment of imagination, we would remember this summer forever. The last day of school came quickly. Lessons were easy, and inside, everything was bubbling with excitement. I had a couple of classes with Casey, while Steve and Brianna were in other classes. We gathered together at lunch, sharing impatient anticipation. The last bell raised a wave of laughter and shouts. Students jumped up, joyfully breaking free. Steve was already waiting for us at the bike parking. Casey and I quickly joined him, and then we waited. "Where is she?" Casey grumbled, nervously tapping his foot. 30 minutes passed in tense silence. Steve adjusted his cap on his dark hair, anxiously looking towards the school. "Maybe we should go back inside and check if everything's okay," he asked. At that moment, a group of girls burst out of the doors, their faces contorted with rage and pain. 3 of them had bloody, broken noses. They stopped for a moment, meeting our gazes filled with hatred, and then turned and walked away. "This isn't..." I began, but cut myself off as Brianna finally emerged. She was quietly sobbing, clutching her arm under a light jacket despite the heat. Without looking at us, she got on her bike. "Brianna," I said carefully. Silence. "Brianna, are you..." "I'm fine. Let's go," she said sharply, looking straight ahead. "What about those girls?" "I said I'm fine. Let's just go."
I want to do this. I need this summer with you. To hell with those bitches." She pressed the pedal sharply and rolled away. We exchanged sad glances and hurried after her. As I rode, I secretly hoped we'd meet those girls again someday so I could knock them off their bikes one by one. The bullying haunted each of us, but Brianna suffered the most. Being one of the few black girls in the Southern Hills back then meant constant hell. Rage boiled inside me, and suddenly, I realized what wish I would choose for myself. We didn't know how to cheer Brianna up, so we just rode in silence. Those girls were the daughters of the richest in town, untouchable. Injustice burned me, but I pushed it aside, focusing on the adventure that lay ahead. The landscape changed. From familiar streets, we moved into hilly terrain. At the foot of the hill stood the old Sanderson house, crumbling like a dying animal. The wood groaned with every gust of wind, and a loose window creaked on rusty hinges. The first time I saw it, I asked my friends about its history. Later, Steve told me that almost 30 years ago, a woman lived there with her son. The boy disappeared. Some said he was eaten by wild animals, others that he drowned or ran away. Whatever the case, Mrs. Sanderson quickly moved out, and no one else settled there. The house was left to rot. Nearby, we found old tracks. The road was uneven, but the thirst for adventure drove us forward. We pedaled steadily. The air burned in our lungs, and the sky shone blue. Finally, we reached a forest path and left our bikes. I looked at Brianna and saw that she was smiling. It instantly lifted our spirits. At that moment, everything seemed possible. Our fears and troubles disappeared. We stood at the threshold of summer, unaware of what awaited us under those vultures.
The path began with rocky ground, where it was no longer possible to ride bikes. Trees intertwined above us, creating a dark arch that swallowed the path and seemed to gape. "Did everyone get everything?" Brianna asked, looking us over. We nodded. "You brought something valuable, dear to you, just in case," Steve added. "Seriously." We nodded again. We had water bottles, sleeping bags, food for the night, and Steve had hidden 2 tents near his reading spot in advance. "Ready?" Casey asked excitedly. Before we set off, Brianna stopped us. "Wait!" She rummaged in her backpack and pulled out 3 necklaces, each with a thin chain and a pendant in the shape of a strange eye. Protective amulets. They ward off evil spirits. I accepted mine gratefully, though I wasn't sure I believed in it. Steve's expression remained unreadable, but he put his on too. Casey was about to open his mouth to joke, but I stopped him with a look, reminding him of what Brianna had already been through today. He bit his tongue and silently put on the necklace. Steve nodded briefly and walked ahead on the path. One by one, we followed him. I walked last and cast a final glance back, watching the railway tracks disappear under the thickets. It seemed like an unsettling sign, as if the forest was watching our every step. Although we had walked here many times, everything felt different now, as if we were leaving our world forever. And only years later did I realize how true that was. The heat pressed relentlessly, sweat trickled down my back. The forest symphony of insects and distant animal cries kept us on guard. Steve occasionally scared us on purpose. Sometimes he succeeded. We carefully watched not to step on snakes or scorpions. Finally, he stopped at his reading spot and pulled 2 hidden tents from the bushes. "One of you bastards help me?" he grumbled. Casey grabbed one and slung it over his shoulder. We moved on. Emerging from under the cover of trees, we found ourselves under a clear sky, bright blue in stark contrast to the swaying greenery around us. The path led us to rolling hills with no clear roads, only rocks and scattered bushes. The sun began to set, painting everything orange gold. "Come on, we still have time to meet the sunset with Old Boldy," Steve exclaimed. Many hills here were nicknamed Old Boldy, but this one truly deserved it. Bare, rocky, without a single tree or bush. We left the tents at the foot and climbed up, grabbing sand and dirt with our hands. Dust swirled around. We laughed, competing to see who was faster. Finally, we stood at the top, looking at the endless hills that stretched out like a frozen green ocean. The sun slowly sank into the horizon, and we froze, watching it. Suddenly, I noticed small black specks circling in the valley. I nudged Brianna and pointed. Soon, Casey and Steve saw them too. All four of us stood enchanted, watching the eternal circling of the vultures. We pulled the tents to the top and quickly set them up. Nearby, we gathered brushwood and lit a fire with Brianna's lighter. The flame trembled. Meanwhile, the sun was hiding, leaving the horizon pink-purple. "Oh, I almost forgot," Casey exclaimed with feigned surprise. He unhurriedly reached for his backpack, making us all watch with curiosity. One by one, he pulled out bottles of beer, and we all blossomed with joy. When he pulled out the last one, I barely laughed aloud. "Have you girls ever even drunk?" he asked, trying to sound grown-up as he handed out the bottles. Brianna just stared, not knowing how to react. "How did you get them?" I wondered, examining the bottle as if it were an alien artifact. "My older sister dropped them off," Casey replied proudly. "Now, I have to do her chores for a month, but it's worth it. Moments like these don't happen often." We had never tried alcohol before. Brianna asked if there was an opener. Casey laughed, grumbled, "Damn," and we used knives to remove the caps. The bottles clinked in a hesitant toast. The taste was disgusting. The warm, bitter beer did not at all match our idea of an adult drink. The sun slowly sank behind the horizon, painting the sky in blood-red colors. We always loved watching the sunset from this hill, but this evening was different. We sat silently by the fire as the last light faded, as if bleeding from a wound. A sudden gust of wind brought the smell of rot. No one said a word. Later, under the stars, we told scary stories until our voices died down. My thoughts drifted far away. Would we really find the well where it shouldn't be, with white eyes staring from the darkness? Or was it all just a fable to scare us? Eventually, Steve and Casey climbed into one tent, and Brianna and I into another. Inside, shadows swayed on the walls as the wind pressed against the fabric. Brianna lay on her back, clutching her injured hand. "Does it hurt that much?" I asked, feeling guilty for not protecting her. She shrugged slightly. "It's nothing." I smiled. "Well, at least you hit Abigail and Alexandria pretty hard." I remembered how those girls held their broken noses. She smiled back and turned to me. Her dark eyes caught mine. We looked at each other for an eternity, and suddenly I realized Brianna was the first girl I liked more than just a friend.
"Do you really believe this story? Do you think it could be true?" I asked quietly. She rolled onto her back thoughtfully. "Is it true or not? Does it matter? We're here together. This moment, this memory is real, even if there's no Wishmaker. Isn't that what matters? Because every story begins sometime, right?" Her words resonated with me. "Yes, makes sense. I guess I'm worried because it's a part of me that wants all of this to be true. But what's real is us, here and now. I'll remember this forever." And I truly did remember, along with the nightmares that would haunt me for the rest of my life. "Brianna, what's your wish?" I asked timidly. The legend didn't forbid telling it beforehand, did it? She fell silent, and I already regretted asking. But eventually she whispered, "I want my parents to see me again. Ever since my brother died, I've been like a ghost to them. They're like dead too." Tears welled up in her eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. "And you?" she suddenly asked. "What do you want?" Until this night, I didn't know. I thought I'd find the answer here, and now it was before me. Brianna with her bruised hand. "I want the bullying to end," I confessed. "For the hatred, racism, and malice towards all of us to disappear, so we can start high school free." Brianna smiled gently, leaned in, and kissed me on the cheek. "Good night, Mike," she whispered, turning onto her back. My heart pounded. I lay there stunned and happy. Before sleep, the smell of decay returned, stronger now, and then sleep took me. We saw the well as if in a dream. I pulled my friends along. Their voices sounded distant, as if through a fog. My legs moved forward on their own, as if I was being pulled by invisible strings. I approached the well, touched the rough stones, and peered into the darkness. And then I woke. The dream remained too vivid, as if alive. I looked at Brianna. She was already awake and looking at me with strange anxiety. Seeing that I was awake, she forced a smile and quietly said, "Good morning." We silently packed up, ate some dry snacks, and set up our tents at the foot of Old Boldy to pick them up on the way back. We climbed to the top once more and looked for where the vultures circled. Finally, we set off. We laughed and joked, holding on to the feeling of adventure, as if the outside world had been left behind. The vultures remained on the horizon the whole time, black specks that kept us on course. We entered a dried-up riverbed where high walls surrounded us on both sides. Snail shells and fossilized fish bones lay on the ground, a memory of a time when water rained here. Tree branches hung overhead, peering down at us. And suddenly, I noticed something strange. Fresh tracks in the mud, hands and feet too close together. My stomach tightened. "Hey, look!" I called out. Steve leaned over my shoulder. Brianna came up from the side. Casey stood behind. "Maybe someone fell," Steve suggested. But none of us believed it. The tracks were fresh, human, and at the same time, wrong. They suddenly ended at a sheer wall of the riverbed. We moved on, but the mood was gone. Now we flinched at every rustle. Conversations died down. Only insects buzzed, and sometimes something rustled in the bushes. The smell of decay grew stronger, scratching at my throat. We emerged from the riverbed into a dense forest. Broken branches formed a path that wound towards the vultures. We hesitated. Brianna whispered, "Maybe someone else was looking for the Wishmaker too." "Maybe," Casey grumbled, but the entrance to the thicket looked like a maw waiting to swallow us. After a short argument, we decided to draw straws. Brianna lost. Casey went first, followed by Steve and Brianna. I lagged behind, looked back. In the distance, something cracked. Branches broke, but no one was there. I hurried forward so not to be left alone. The forest closed in on us, thick and suffocating. Every sound made us tense. Branches scratched our skin. Low branches swayed as if warning us. On the ground, patches where it was as if something had ripped the ground out by its roots. Soon, a tree fell in front of us, too large to climb over. We knelt and crawled under it. The ground scratched our palms, and immediately on the other side, an even stronger stench hit us. It made me nauseous. "Would the legend say anything about the Wishmaker smelling bad?" I asked, coughing. Steve shrugged without turning around. "I haven't heard that, but maybe that's what attracts the vultures." "There's certainly nothing pleasant about it," I muttered. I had felt a faint breath even in Old Boldy, but here it was just awful.
"Finally!" Casey exclaimed, pushing through the thicket into a small clearing. We followed. Before us stretched dry land, with sparse bushes and rocks, and to the left, an old stone well, cracked and ancient. A vulture sat on its edge, watching us with dark, unblinking eyes. The smell of rot came from there. We froze, disbelieving our eyes. "Saints," Steve exhaled. "This is impossible." The vulture flew off. A piece of meat hung from its beak. I felt a strange numbness come over me. All our horror stories had always been just words, but now they had become reality. Casey was the first to move forward, as if in a dream. Steve and Brianna followed him. I also moved, unable to stop myself. Casey was the first to look into the well. Steve approached and recoiled sharply, falling to his knees, retching violently. "Steve!
What's in there? Brianna rushed to him. He just shook his head, continuing to vomit. Casey stepped back, looking up. No, not this. I approached and looked in too. The stone burned my palms from the heat. A hum grew in my ears, and I saw bodies, human bodies, piled together like broken branches. Skin burned and cracked, colors red and purple. Flies swarmed in empty eyes, in wounds. Some parts were already gnawed, bones sticking out. Another vulture flew down, landing on the gruesome feast. Nausea turned me inside out. And then a sound, a faint scratching, nails on stone. I froze. A tiny, broken voice. Help. I recoiled, falling to the ground, breathing raggedly. Brianna rushed to me. Mike, what's in there? Don't look, Brianna. It's horrible. We have to... There's a woman. Casey interrupted. His voice trembled. She's alive. Steve got up, swaying, and approached cautiously. Brianna pulled her hand from mine and also looked down. It'll be okay, Mike, she whispered, though her eyes glowed with fear. I forced myself to look again. The woman was scrambling up the wall, like an animal in a cage. Her legs were unnaturally twisted, her face covered in tears and dirt. Please, she rasped, incessantly scratching. That sound cut into my brain, giving me no peace. We'll call for help. Hold on, Casey began, but realized the futility of the words himself. Brianna suddenly gasped sharply. Her gaze hardened. I turned, and my heart sank.
A tall figure emerged from the shadows. It stood silently, head slightly tilted, as if studying us. Then it took a step forward. It was a man, but almost not human. Over 2 meters tall. Dirty brown hair covered its face. The body was muscular, naked, only in torn shorts. It stood tense, like a beast before a leap. Steve broke first. To hell with this! And ran. And in an instant, the man lunged forward. Fast, terrifying. Adrenaline surged through my veins. My chest burned as I ran, consumed by horror. Only one image was in my head. This monster dragging me back to the well. We raced towards the forest, towards the path. Casey ran beside me, gasping and sobbing. He was never fast, and was now falling behind. Come on, Casey, move! I yelled, adjusting my pace to his. Branches cracked behind us. Something huge was breaking through the thicket. A hoarse, wet breath was getting closer. I looked back again and again, but saw only shadows. The fallen tree was already ahead. Brianna and Steve slipped through first, diving under the low branches. Faster! Brianna shrieked. I rushed after them, falling to my knees and pushing my way under the log. I turned. Casey was just crawling, his face pale, drenched in sweat. And then he screamed, a wild, animalistic scream. He was pulled back. I grabbed his hand. Help! He's got Casey! I roared, pulling with all my might. My grip weakened as something incredibly strong pulled him back. Tears streamed down Casey's face, his eyes pleading. Don't let go, he whispered, calm in his terror. Brianna and Steve jumped up, grabbed his other arm and pulled with me. But that creature was too strong. He twisted Casey like a crocodile in a death roll. Our hands slipped. Casey's head and shoulders remained invisible. His eyes bulged with fear. For a moment, I saw the man's face. Red eyes burned with madness. His mouth stretched into a smile. Saliva dripped down his chin. And he laughed with a low, choked chuckle, enjoying the game. A sharp crunch. Bone cracked. Casey's scream ripped through the air. Another tug, and we collided head-on with a tree. Sparks flashed before my eyes.
I saw him being dragged into the thicket one last time. His screams faded and died.
We froze, stunned with horror. The sky darkened, the sun setting. An argument erupted between us whether to go back or not. We felt guilty, but fear won. We weren't heroes. This wasn't a rescue story. Instinct screamed to run before nightfall. And we ran. Grief mixed with fear. We tried to convince ourselves the police would find Casey, catch that man. But we never saw him again. When we returned to the tracks, twilight had already fallen over us. Casey's bicycle stood alone, gleaming in the last light. When I got home, my parents looked at me, dirty and broken. There was horror in their eyes, but it didn't compare to what we carried inside. Search parties went to the site. A few days ago, they found a well. It was burning, smoking, filled with bodies so disfigured they were unrecognizable. Casey was not found, nor was the man. His loss burned a void in me. I still try to convince myself that we were just children and couldn't do more, but the thought doesn't let go. It sits in my head, quietly watching.